welcome to this week's episode of Not D&D, brought to you by EN World Live. As always, I'm your host, Jessica, and joining me this week, I have the gorgeous team from Leyline Press. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us, yeah.
Of course. Would you like to introduce yourself to the chat and to the podcast?
I'm Panny. I'm one of the writers and designers of Salvage Union.
I'm Alad. I'm the other one. I tend to do a lot of the design work, illustration, layout, all that sort of stuff. And development as well. Team.
Amazing. So this week we are going to be talking about Salvage Union, which is a mech TTRPG. Is like I feel that's a very unfair way to summarize it, maybe, but we will be getting into the game a bit more, so you can hear about that. If you're watching the live stream, hello, thank you for joining us. You can put your questions in the chat, and we will answer them. If they could be about Salvage Union or tabletop RPGs in general, that would be most helpful. And if you're listening to the podcast, any links to anything we're talking about will be in the show notes for you to take a look at later. So before we talk about Salvage Union too much, I'm going to be nosy and intrusive and ask about you as individuals and as gamers. So my question I ask everybody that comes on the show is, do you remember your first your experience of tabletop role-playing games? Do you remember your first game or your first introduction to the hobby?
So for tabletop role-playing games, like most people, it was Dungeons and Dragons.
The classic, yeah.
Yeah, it's an onboarding game. For me, it was 4th edition D&D, which was one of the more controversial ones. But me and my friend group enjoyed it. It was very sort of accessible at the time, it felt. And then I did soon move away from it into playing other systems when I was at university and beyond.
For me, it was a bit less usual. I was around 10 or something, but we didn't really. I grew up in sort of the sticks in North Wales, so we didn't have access to a lot of like game shops and stuff, and we never had a copy of D&D. We did play Warhammer, so it's all homebrew stuff for me for like the first kind of like 10 years. Really, I don't think I played D&D until I was like 25. We just like made up stat blocks and drew maps and just kind of like cracked on with it, really. So the first homebrew was I sort of drew a map. We put some stat lines together and went from there. But it was
Were you the forever DM of the group then, Alad? Were you like homebrewing and designing games right from the beginning then?
No, we actually kind of took turns.
Cool.
I rarely ran normal games. I tended to always homebrew because I like drawing maps. That was kind of like the big thing. So I've always loved drawing maps. So I'd always like draw a map and then be like, right, okay, well, I've drawn the map, so I kind of have to GM it. And that was always like homebrew stuff. But then as we got older, other people like got games. So I played a lot of Vampire in the late 90s. And my friend Aaron had the books for that. So he ran that. Then from there we played a bit of like Werewolf and a lot of White Wolf stuff, actually, thinking about it now. But it was the late 90s, so I guess that makes sense.
It was the time for that,
yeah. So not forever DM in the group, to be fair. When I played D&D, that was another friend ran that because he had the D&D books. So it was
fair enough. Cool. Panny, what about you? You said you mentioned at uni you kind of started branching out away from D&D. What were some of the systems that kind of you started branching out into more indie games? If you can remember.
It was about a decade ago. We played. So there's a game called Scion, which was another White Wolf game. Thinking about it, which was like a game where you all play as kind of the scions of various demigods, which was really interesting and enjoyable at the time. I also played GURPS because you've got to play GURPS.
I've never played GURPS.
I
can't imagine why. I think I read a review that talked about sort of bullet trajectory and tracking like the trajectory as it drops over distance, and I was kind of like, not doing that. Yeah, not.
Have you tried GURPS? As a very common thread in people that are looking for not D&D, because it is a very flexible system that works with a variety of things. So it is kind of a bit of an in-joke in the beggar talk and begging you to play another RPG thing is, have you tried GURPS? So that makes sense. You should definitely try it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a meme. But I think the real big one that opened my mind was playing Apocalypse World. Which is powered by the first sort of big power by the game, and I think that's the indie game that made me go, oh, okay, so you don't have to play a role-playing game in that sort of trad model that all those other games like Scion and GURPS and all, whilst they're all, and D&D, whilst they're all quite different, they do follow that sort of quite traditional model of GM narrates, everyone else makes characters. Whereas you do that in PBTA, but it just mixed it up so much, but it like opened up my sort of creative mind on it, I guess.
Yeah,
definitely. I've had a lot of designers mention Powered by the Apocalypse, actually, for the same reasons you said, that it kind of opened you up other options. It was like, alternatively, have you considered this? And sometimes until someone comes along and does that, it doesn't make you think of all those other things. So another question I had is about, so Leyline Press is obviously how you publish Salvage Union, and I wondered how Leyline Press came about. So how do you become people that were playing a lot of games and enjoyed them to becoming designers and publishers?
So we actually met while we were working at Modifius. So we were both working there. I was on the dev team for miniatures and stuff. So I was in studio there doing all the 3D stuff, and we sort of like sat next to each other. So that's kind of how we met, right? We both we left within a month of each other, and we both sort of branched out to do our own thing, and neither of those went too well because it was in early 2020, right?
Hey, Shadow of Mog was a great hit.
Shadow, it did better than Mutants. So we both did like Zine Quest games, didn't we? For Zine Quest, and they didn't go too great. And then, anyways, we both sort of went back, got normal jobs, as it were. But then I'd been working a little bit on Salvage Union. That's been something that's been an idea for a very long time, and I'd sort of put a loose bit of stuff together, but it wasn't great. It was very, very unfinished. It wasn't even an ash can really then. And so then I was kind of talking to Penny about it, and we were like, well, why don't we team up on it? Because a lot of the stuff that I'm good at, which I'd sort of I'd got some art done, sort of the concept, the cover was already kind of mostly there, I think, at that point. But I didn't really have much written. And Penny's strength is in the writing, so we were kind of like, why don't we team up on it? And the rest, as I say, is history. So a lot of chats down the pub, I think, is kind of where it started.
Where all indie publishing meetings happen is down the pub in the UK. Absolutely.
Yeah, it has to be,
Well, fantastic. Well, let's dive into Salvage Union then. I mean, one of the things I want to start talking about a little bit is the art, because someone commented on Twitter that they've always enjoyed poring over the art in Salvage Union. It's wonderful stuff, very inspiring. So could you talk a little bit about maybe perhaps, Penny, if you want to introduce what Salvage Union is, give the quick elevator pitch introduction for somebody that's never heard of it.
Yeah, so Salvage Union is a post-apocalyptic mech tabletop role-playing game with sort of easy to learn and accessible mechanics. You play as a group of salvagers who go out into the wasteland, collect scrap, and bring it back to their home base, which is this massive walking mech called a Union crawler. And then they use that scrap to support their community, because the crawler has all their friends, family, loved ones, and people in the wasteland who are trying to sort of survive with them. And as part of that, adventures ensue, whether dealing with the corporations that run the world, or wasters, raiders, and biotitans, and all sorts of shenanigans in the wasteland, as it were.
Fantastic. All sounds exciting stuff. And we did mention, obviously, somebody in the comments has already mentioned the art style. So what was the inspiration for the artwork and the, because that seems really important in the games, and it's a really pretty book that you've made as well. So what was the inspiration and kind of idea behind the visual style of the book?
I mean, the cover wise, obviously, is the we've got one here, but the cover is it's like a Haynes manual kind of cover, which I mean, I think certainly for me, and sorry, I'm trying to put it here without, I'll just hide my face. It's better looking than me. Well, there you go. It's on screen. It's my, everyone's dad and uncle, whoever had copies of these down in the garage, and so I kind of always liked the idea of that, on a mech, get the cutaway. In terms of getting that done, obviously, found Alex Connolly on the internet and commissioned a couple of pieces from him to sort of start. And then Hamish Freighter as well was one of our other early artists who the banner behind us here and what we've got on the screen before was one of Hamish's pieces. And that was really the first piece that we kind of commissioned from him, because, I was just kind of browsing really, and there's a lot of nice art out there. I think when we were working at Modiphius, there was a lot of Free League books that Modiphius were doing distribution for at the time. And so one of the standout ones, Tales from the Loop, obviously Simon Stalenhag's art, that absolutely gorgeous. And, it kind of, it changed my kind of perception a little bit on the standard of art that could be in an RPG. Typically you sort of see an RPG and it's about the written content, right? So it's about, right, okay, cool. So what you have is you have rules, you have mechanics, you have narrative, and the art's just a little bit of fluff just to tart it up a little bit and to make it look nice. But then things like Tales from the Loop, Morkborg particularly as well, they redefined kind of how you would use art in an RPG for me, because the art kind of is the content. I know a lot of people say this about Morkborg, is kind of like it's style over substance, but really, like, for me, the style is the substance. It informs so much about the world and sort of how you might interact with it, or how it makes you feel, and sort of how it would inspire you to run a game, that it is the substance of the book for the most part, right? And that's kind of what we tried to achieve with Salvage as well, by making it kind of an in-universe artifact in terms of like the layout, the art, and all of that. It's a really important part of the experience, if that makes sense. Yeah,
absolutely. I do really think artwork in games absolutely do it. It kind of sets the tone and the vibe for the players, for the setting, and even before you started reading the rule book, it kind of sets the tone for what it is. So I completely agree with you.
Right? Yeah, it takes you right there, right? Yeah.
Absolutely, and also really important for crowdfunding and Kickstarters. So this was successfully funded in January 2022, and you have now fulfilled to the backers at the end of last year. So that must be a nice, sigh of relief after doing the fulfillment and all that fun stuff, which is why we get into publishing. And now it's available at retail. So if anyone is interested, there's links in the show notes. You can go to leyline.press to pick up a copy if you're interested when we're talking, or to look at some more of the details as we're talking as well. But talking about the game in a bit more detail, so we are using the Quest RPG for this as the system. Could we talk a little bit about the Quest RPG for those that aren't familiar, and also why you chose it, why you thought that would be a good fit to tell this style of story?
So Quest is a fantasy tabletop role-playing game by a company called The Adventure Guild. And I think the most unique thing about it is that it's incredibly accessible. Like it's designed to really take people who've never played role-playing games, never heard of role-playing games, have no idea what they are, and onboard them on it, but in a way that goes that extra step. Like the character sheet, for example, is just kind of almost a written out story that you write about your character, rather than being sort of a wall of statistics, or even simplified statistics. And the core mechanic is just a flat D20 with some variable resolution to it, with no like additional stats, skills, modifiers. And then it just has an ability system that tags onto that, and those abilities let you do sort of bespoke things within the narrative, and give players like narrative agency, but they're also written in such a way that kind of leads you into like role playing out a scene. Like they're very well structured to beyond like, I don't know, your typical like persuasion check. It won't be that. It will specifically say, it will explicitly explain the ability in a bit of a way that like games that have the PBTA games do, but far more like explicit. And and I think that became a good fit because of that accessibility element of it. Because with Salvage Union, we really wanted to make a mech game that was easy to pick up and play, because the majority of mech games in the genre tend to be lend themselves towards the far more crunchy tactical elements, which are very much fun in themselves, but we felt like a sort of mech game you could put on the table, and that a sort of a tired dad could see themselves playing was kind of
well, it's one of those things. It was the sort of thing that we could see ourselves playing as well, because I say this in pretty much every interview.
Dad.
Sorry? Well, yeah, I mean, I'm getting there, to be honest. But not a dad. I'm just very tired.
Fair enough.
But, it's like really, I really like Lancer. Like really love it. Got the book, art fantastic. The layout is great. But it's I don't understand how to play it still, it's quite complicated and really crunchy, and you just need something a little bit. I like something a bit lighter, and I think maybe that's just my roots of sort of like just doing a lot of FKR stuff. Like you want to be able to just kind of focus on the fiction, and this is the thing, right? Like with mech building, like adding all these systems modules, that's like a really important part of the fun is like building that mech. But then you need kind of quite a bare bones chassis to build all of those subsystems on. Because if you start with already a relatively crunchy system, like because we did talk about starting doing it on BX, didn't we?
We talked about a few options.
But
BX, sort of old school D&D. About the mecha hack. Did that quite well.
Yeah, they already did it, but yes, there was that. But and we had like custom stuff that we were sort of thinking about, but it was every time we sort of did it, there was just like a lot of stuff to track. So you really have to strip down the core of the game as bare bones as you can get it. But Quest was just a good fit, wasn't it, in terms of the ability to translate well to mech systems and modules and stuff, right? So
yeah, that was a real. Quest, as I said, has the. Like each character class has a different set of abilities, which is their main way that the classes in the game differentiate themselves with it. And it's fantasy stuff, so it's like fighters and rangers and whatnot. And it made sense to sort of take that ability and imagine that ability is now a laser guidance on a mech or a chaff launcher, and it's still like formatted in the same way. And it then lets you have those sort of fun buttons as though you're sort of pressing a button on your mech. But you're not having it's more like narrative driven in how a lot of the abilities play out. So it's not as heavy in terms of it's sort of what you see is what you get. Like you activate the ability, you do a cool thing, you blow up a part of their mech, or you stun them, or you drain their energy, or something like that. But you don't have that wider complexity attached to that. It's all sort of
or you can just be like, right, okay, well, I've got a chaff launcher. I'm not doing the specific thing with it, but you just maybe I'm going to try and startle some birds with it, or like, do you know what I mean? You just have the thing, so just use the thing. It's the old 10-foot pole, isn't it? It's it's not explicitly designed for anything, but you can use it for wherever you want.
Fantastic. We talked a little bit about character creation then, like you're saying how it's a little bit different there. Can we go into detail a little bit about the sort of characters that people will be playing when they're playing this game?
So all your characters are at heart salvagers. So you are immediately sort of part of a group and part of a community within a sort of wider setting of a sort of post-apocalyptic wasteland of Salvage Union. Then we use a class-based system in that, so you can play as a sort of scout or a soldier or engineer, and they're all sort of integral sort of components of the Salvage Union, I guess. And then those characters are then differentiated with their different abilities, which give them various bits of niche protection. So the scout has a lot of abilities to like gather information, but also to sort of talk themselves out of situations as well. Like they're sort of a silver-tongued type character, whereas the hauler, who's the big sort of cargo carrying character, is sort of a leadership character as well. So they have a bit mix of abilities that let them take sort of charge in leadership positions and make deals, inspire their allies, but also sort of haul lots of cargo, because that's quite an important part of the game. You're able to sort of build into a niche and
there's we've basically got skill trees. Like you can see it on the scout one here that you've got up. So these are the sort of core ability trees, advanced abilities, and then legendaries. But all of the classes. So I'm just going to hold this up and hopefully you can kind of see it. We've got kind of that diagram which has all of the classes on, and so all of the trees are kind of interlinked, and as you go into advanced classes you can move kind of like up and down and across, so it's quite flexible. And then we've got the generic salvager, which is sort of a classless but can't gain advanced abilities. So
that's a character you can sort of tailor to fit kind of whatever
Yeah.
image you have. But it's very, very it's still a very light framework. Like the intent is that it's just enough for you to sort of have an understanding concept of the character, and then you're able to take that into play and really do what you want with it in a narrative sense.
And of course, it's relatively light as well in terms of the pilots, especially because the other half of your character is your mech, and so you've always got two sheets, right? And then the mechs are a bit looser, so they're stratified by tech tier. Which that's kind of like the leveling mechanic, because as your Union crawler levels up, you gain access to higher tech stuff, and then you can then build the systems and modules out of the salvage that you find in the wastes. So it's kind of sneakily a bit sort of scrap as XP, really, because the more scrap you find and bring back, then obviously that's how you kind of level up in it as well. So
that's the loop.
That's the gameplay loop, isn't it?
I think mechs in simple terms in the games are really, you take those pilot abilities and then you just bolt them onto your mech effectively, but then we separate them into systems and modules. But it's a fairly simple sort of mech building structure to add to that, and they're very flexible. Sorry.
No, that's great. I was just going to ask, so with these characters in mind, what sort of stories are we telling in Salvage Union? So I've got an idea of the setting, like you say, post-apocalyptic world. We're going around scrapping, getting things that we can. We've got this crew, this kind of found family vibes. It almost sounds like that we're there. So what are the adventures? What are the shenanigans we're going to be getting up to?
There's. We really wanted to show that there could be like a wide variety of sort of stories you can tell in the system. So there's like 3 adventure modules that we publish with it. And for example, the one we they're there. This is also one of the. So this is one of the ones we published, False Flag, and this is a kind of Cold War-esque espionage adventure set in sort of a frozen northern wastes, where you're making tough decisions as you're sort of trapped between 2 corporations who are fighting over sort of meld nanites, which is this sort of valuable resource that's totally not an analogy for oil.
And, you mean the black nanites and the rigs in the middle drilling it?
It's very subtle.
No one would confuse that. No one would draw those lines. No need.
So that's one. Whereas we've got like We Were Here First, which is by Diogo Nogueira, and this is just a sort of pure, sort of almost gonzo adventure where you're there's all these meteors full of this resource called Chimerium have crash landed in this sort of more traditional wasteland, sort of Mad Max-esque wasteland environment, and you're just rushing to get them. But then there's like 10 other factions. There's like Corpos, Wastelanders, Raiders, and everyone else is rushing to get them. So it's a bit more of a race against time. And again, you're making tough decisions in who do you help. You still need the resources to keep your crawler and your community alive, but there might be other decisions to make. And there's a bit of a mystery in that of like what's going on, what with a Chimerium.
What's the history and stuff. There's a lot of abandoned facilities. And Rainmaker is the last one, which someone's commented on. So Rainmaker is by Luke Gearing, and it was one of the first finished ones. I'm particularly pleased with Rainmaker because I actually illustrated that one as well myself. So,
nice.
So the cover's mine on that one, which it's my favorite cover. It's best. Well, it's the best cover. So that's a bit more of a sort of more diesel punk vibes of sort of defunct weather satellite causing sort of weird weather patterns, and then again sort of that corporate hegemony in different areas, and particularly then sort of like how weather and the flow of resources kind of defines boundaries, and what happens when you start messing with those, and what the outcome of that is. And again, a bit of a mystery in there of getting all of the keys and all of that kind of thing without giving too much away.
But I think with all of the adventures, well, obviously so there's lots of campaign and writing advice in the book as well. The focus of it is on exploration at its core. So it's not as much a game that's designed for you to sit down, work out like what your sort of narrative is, and then present that to the players. It's more a game that wants to present interesting situations, interesting environments, worlds, and characters to the players, and then sort of play to find out what happens. A bit like in that PBTA way, in a way. Yeah, and I think like the through line is like exploration, I think, and discovery is really important.
Draw a map. Start by drawing a map. Start as how I start every, and then throw the players in, and then see what they do. Right.
Yeah. Well, I was just about to ask about how, as a game master. So if you're a game master and you've come from running a lot of D&D, which is very different tone, very different vibe, and you're coming to Salvage Union, what kind of, you mentioned in the book there's some guidance. What sort of guidance do you give for playing this style of game, like where you say it's a lot about exploration and interacting with the world, opposed to go to this dungeon and kill 20 goblins? What advice would you give to somebody running this game?
So I think it sounds a bit obvious sometimes, but just sort of follow. So the game has a lot of like accessible features which sort of guide you into like how to set up sessions, advice on how to run, like saying yes to the players a lot, for example, and encouraging creativity with players. And I'd say like, following those elements of the advice rather than trying to, which is a habit. It's certainly a habit I've done as well. I was trying to break free from my D&D shackles of like treating it like a D&D game where they're, or however you run a D&D game. So like I'd say, treat it on its own merit and say yes lots. I think that's really important for it to work as well.
There is good advice on map structuring as well, because the map structuring does work slightly differently to other trad games like BX or whatever. So it doesn't really use hex maps as such. It uses like nested point crawl maps. So it's kind of got like areas and then regions and then locations. Regions and then areas and then locations. So the regions connect to each other and they take a certain amount of time to travel between. That's like one downtime session. And then as you go into there, then in a region, there will be another map, which is a point crawl map of an area and of various interconnected areas. And then they're in hours travel by mech between those. And then inside an area, you might have locations within that. Sometimes it might just be one location. And then the book kind of advises you on how to do that and then how to stock those areas with sort of threats or like interesting places, like, how much to be kind of like, this should be relatively light and this should be sort of, maybe there's people who want to help, like, I think we've got some, is there tables in there as well to stock?
Yeah,
so there's some locations and stuff, location tables and stuff that you can roll on to sort of get a quick map up and running to begin with. And then just kind of, like I say, let the players kind of lead the way and then react to what they're doing, really, rather than, pre-planning too much.
Or trying to force outcomes.
Trying to force outcomes, I think, the best bit of GM advice I ever got was when I was running, I can't remember what it was. It was Infinity on the Modiphius stream. This was, and I remember speaking to Virginia Page, who had previously run a session on their stream, and I was kind of like, I had all of these notes because I hadn't run a game in a while. And I was like, what's your advice? And she was like, oh yeah, no, just literally if it's a few sessions, you only need really a few lines of like main points and then, just improv it out. And I really kind of started trimming back a lot of my prep after that, because I did used to prep a lot more in terms of, drawing maps and having every NPC and like their family history and stuff. You don't need that really.
I mean, I found this must have been when I was about 18 or so running D&D, and I found like a 3,000 word document I'd done just for one session.
Oh wow!
I've just written the entire thing as basically prose. Looking back, I'm just like, what?
How much of that did you actually use as well? Like,
well, none of it, because the players almost immediately probably went, "Oh right, let's not go to that town. Let's go to this one."
Exactly.
They were. I made them.
It wasn't pretty.
It wasn't pretty.
True.
They followed the railroad. But I just didn't know. I didn't know other structures. I think, like other gameplay structures. When I even discovered like hex scrolls as a concept, I was like, oh, cool. A structure exists other than like just do an encounter, then do the next encounter. So
yeah, great. Well, that's some really kind of solid advice coming through there about how to kind of run the game for new people. I know some things people struggle with is like D&D is very popular, and that's great, and we love it and all. But sometimes it's great to play something that's not D&D. Do you have any tips on how to get a table excited to play Salvage Union? So if somebody's seen this and they want to run it, how would you convince a table to go from playing D&D into playing something different?
So generally, I'm against. Generally, I'm against convincing people. The way I convince people to play games is I say, I'm going to run this game at this time. Who is interested? And I'll give a pitch. Obviously, I'll say it's a post-apocalyptic mech game. Who's in, and generally, you'll find that a lot more people will be interested than you might expect. There is sometimes a problem when. So if someone's got a regular play group, which I understand, and and they want to play with all their friends, and they're like umming and erring. And I guess to them, I'd say it's a very quick and easy game. It's very easy to learn, and it's very accessible. And you can play it in a few hours, and you might enjoy it. But in general, I'd say just try and play other games and pitch other games, and people will be a lot more responsive. Games other than D&D, people will be more responsive than you expect they will be, I think.
Yeah, I think, I knew your thing was just going to be like, just run it, bro. Tell them that you're running it.
Tell them that you're running and the people will come, sure.
Yeah.
Great.
I think the thing that I've done in the past as well, if you're trying to turn people onto it, just run a one-shot. Just tell them it's going to be a one-shot, but then leave a cliffhanger. And 9 times out of 10 people will want to play the next session to figure out what's going to happen. And getting people to commit to a one shot is way easier. If you try and get anyone to commit to, I think every campaign I've ever run started out as, we're just going to do like 2 or 3 sessions and then that'll be it, because everyone's like, no good, because I can't commit to more than 3 weeks in advance, and I can't commit to a 3-year campaign. But then as soon as you get started, it's like, okay, cool, we've been playing for 18 months every week and everyone's loving it. Because you just have to you can't get anyone excited about a game, I don't think, really, until they've started playing it and they've played a session. So just trying to get people to play a session. And if they really won't do it, then do it on your birthday and say, it's my birthday, can I just run this for you?
Oh, that's great.
Very difficult to say no. I have done that once. I'm not proud of it, but
that's interesting. I've not heard that one. I love that. I love that. So generally, it sounded like the kind of the drug dealer approach of the first one's free kids, get them in for
first one's free,
get them hooked, and then okay, cool. That's some solid advice. Thank you so much. We're coming up near to the end of our time on the show. So if you watching live and did have any questions you wanted to ask, now is the time to kind of get them in. But talking to you guys, is there anything else you kind of want to talk about the game or brag about the game? Make sure people know about it before we kind of wrap up.
So one of the things I am most pleased with actually is because we put a lot of work into the production of the book, which I think comes through, if you see the if you see it, it's the spreads and everything, it's all really nice. But the thing I'm most proud of is on the cover. Now you can't really see this in photos normally, or it's the sort of thing you only really notice in person. But when we were having it printed, I really struggled to find the paper for the cover underneath the spot varnish. Because what I wanted the effect where because you can see here around the edges, it looks worn around the edges of the book, as if the paper's worn away. And I wanted that to feel like rough paper. But you can't apply a spot varnish to uncoated paper because it'll just all soak in and you won't see it. But we managed to find this linen texture paper. But that edge bit around the edge of the book is actually not glossy. The rest of the book is all a little bit glossy, and that bit isn't. And it really genuinely makes it feel like an old pre-worn book. And it runs all down the spine and everything, and it just, there's something very tactile about it. And I'm inordinately proud of that, actually, because it really does feel worn. And on the plus side, it means that if you kind of slightly wreck your book by taking it to the pub and leaving it in a pool of beer, it doesn't matter because it actually just adds to the patina. So there's no excuse not to crack the spine. Go wild with it. It doesn't matter.
It's made to be used and enjoyed.
It is, yes.
Fantastic.
I'm really pleased with that.
No, it's really cool. I'd say briefly that it's but we packed a lot into this book. So initially it was meant to be A5, 200 pages.
God, yeah.
We expanded it to a 340-page B5 book with 3 adventure modules that ended up being twice the size. So it really is like a complete experience. And we just put so much love into like all the writing, which I did, and all the different like customization options. Because whilst it is a simple to learn mech game, we still wanted it to have a lot of like fun customization options, but do genuinely make a difference during play. And so there's like 150 at least different things that you can customize your mech with. There's 30 different mech chassis in the game, each of which is fully illustrated, which play differently, and there's a lot of options. And
I think we worked it out. I think if you add up all the different sort of pilot and mech combos with all the equipment and systems and modules, I think was it like 300 million permutations or something like that you can build. There's so much stuff in the book. Like it's there's a lot of options.
It's very replayable then, definitely. You're not going to run out of content there. Fantastic. So if people are interested, they want to learn more or pick up a copy, where's the best place for them to go online to find you?
Currently it's www.leyline.press. And we ship internationally.
Yeah, we ship internationally. We've got stock in the US as well. So for the American audience, we've got stock there, which keeps postage costs down, and obviously it's not a several week shipping process.
Customs friendly too.
Customs friendly as well as a big one. Yeah. So
for the US.
For the US and the UK, for the EU, sadly,
we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. No comment on that one.
I've tried so hard not to talk about Brexit. I've tried so hard,
and I know you love it so much. You wrote a game about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, great. So links in the show notes and if you're watching live, up on the screen and in the chat for you to check all those things out there. So we're coming up to the end of our time. I do have a final question that I ask everyone, and if you have any recommendations for any other tabletop RPGs that aren't ones that you've made and that are obviously not D&D.
So I'm going to go for Cyborg by Johan Nohr, which is a rules light cyberpunk game with a gorgeous art and aesthetic. It's sort of a sequel to Morkborg, which is not a sequel, kind of a hack of Morkborg, which is a sort of fantasy version of it. But I prefer it. I think Morkborg's really like bleak and kind of grimdark. Having run it, it kind of feels too bleak for some players. But I found when I run Cyborg and I'm like, it's bleak and grimdark, but it's sort of set in late stage capitalism, everyone goes, yeah, that makes sense. Like they don't question the premise at that point. So I found it more fun to run in a bleak way there, and it's a really fun over the top silly game.
For me, I've kind of got two at the moment. My traditional answer is always Troika. I really love Troika. I think it's probably one of my favorite games ever, actually. It's a game that I would have liked to have made. The Numinous edition, particularly for the art, the pseudo lino cut character art is absolutely beautiful. Typography choice is like absolutely bang on for what is a relatively simple book. It does everything excellently, and there's some really cool idiosyncratic rules, like the initiative rule is, I mean, it's absolutely insane. Like, and in play, it can be a bit unwieldy, shall we say? But it's really exciting because, like, it's really like, it's really weird because I don't know if you're aware of it, but you put like tokens into a bag and you pull them out, so you could like have 3 goes in a row. And then it's just combat over and nobody else gets to go. Or you could just like get absolutely smashed by, all the NPCs and then, that's it. Generally, it sort of evens out. But it's really fun. And I guess another one would be Vaults of Varn, which I'm quite excited about at the moment. And I think that's just in terms of the descriptiveness of the writing. It's just, I can picture it. I want to make art of that book,
Nice.
So it's kind of like, again, it's like a weird sort of science fantasy thing set in the desert. It's really, really cool. Oh, and anything by Will Jobst as well. Shout out Will Jobst. I love his stuff. Talk particularly. Talk was a big inspiration for the layout of Salvage. So so I'm picking a lot of games. I'm not sure to count Troika. I'll pick Troika.
That's fine. You can like a lot of games. It is good. Like we publish games, so we're people that probably like games a bit. So and it's my sneaky way to get ideas for future guests as well. So I always like picking those. But so that's some great recommendations there. Thank you so much. Thank you both so much for coming on and giving up your time to talk to me, and from myself and people in the chat as well. Thank you very much for the rule system and for bringing Salvage Union to us so we can tell these kind of stories with your game. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much. And thank you, chat, as well, for the nice words.
Absolutely. So I was going to say thank you to everyone who watched live and everyone who's listening to the podcast. So thank you very much for coming along to support and learn about different indie tabletop RPGs. If you're at all interested in Salvage Union, I would recommend going to the website and having a look and see how you can support them, because the best way to support indie tabletop RPG creators is to buy their stuff. We'll be back same time, same place next week. We'll be talking about Terminal, which is a game very heavily inspired by The Matrix. So life is living in a simulation. So if you're interested in listening to that, same time, same place next week. But for now, I think we'll say goodbye. So thank you very much, all. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.